Eye on the Path. A Woman's Journey to a Parallel World by Carol Jean Rock. Automatic writing guided and channeled through Spirit Guide. Eye on the Path. Chapter by chapter of the book. Chapter 1, Third Dimensional Countdown. Chapter 2, The Last Day. Chapter 3, Secrets. Chapter 4, The Exit. Chapter 5, The Cleansing. Chapter 6, Coming Home. Chapter 7, Kara, Conception of the Book. Chapter 8, From Where We Came. Chapter 9, Life on the Mountain. Chapter 10, The Dinner. Chapter 11, The UN Trip. Chapter 12, Delivering the Message. Chapter 13, Mountain Return. Chapter 14, End of Contract. Let's begin. Chapter 1, Third Dimensional Countdown. The radio blared as the monotone voice of the show's guest speaker said, "This is truly the sign of the planet Earth's future. There is an exchange of energy between Mother Earth and all her inhabitants. We feed off of one another in energy transition. However, we as the human species have polluted her, endangered her, and caused an imbalance now. In doing this, we have also infected the rest of the planet inhabitants, insects, animals, plants, and indeed even some human beings here. You have to understand this even reaches out from the planet. The imbalance radiates out into the universe, touching other planets in space. You can see the implications here." The voice continued. "The planet will ultimately try to rejuvenate itself as a safety mechanism. She will cleanse herself of the disease that has been ravishing her. Planet Earth is not an entity, but she is, however, a living life force that follows her path of continuance to support her inhabitants in vital energy that dwells upon her. Plus, she holds her place in the solar system to hold the balance for the cycle of the planets that revolve in this system. We are seeing signs now of the planets who are going to play a role in her change and completion of transformation." Another voice on the radio then said hesitantly, "So you feel this 3-year storm prediction is the means to accomplish this?" The guest cleared his throat, almost as to give his next words more meaning. "Yes, most assuredly. The signs are becoming more and more clear each day around the planet. It is a scientific possibility. Polar shifts, solar flares, global warming, and the shifting of the planet's platelets, scientists now say. Behind closed doors, it is no longer a theory, but a looming reality for us." It was already 4 o'clock and Cheryl thought to herself, where did the day go? She flicked off the radio in the kitchen. She looked out her kitchen window at her flower beds. She sighed, thinking how hard she worked all summer long to fill them with lush, vibrant colors. Now with winter approaching, the flower beds looked empty and dismal, with reminiscence of the wilted stalks of what was once full of life. Cheryl brushed the bangs from her eyes and bent over to continue emptying the dishwasher. She could hear the wind outside blowing the huge oak branches along the roof of the house. She noticed this morning, the leafless trees seemed to reach out with their tentacle-like branches for whatever sunlight they could expose themselves to now. The planet was entering her sleeping period and cycle of rejuvenation. At least this part of her was. When you think about it, the planet has so many sides to it, all working simultaneously. Yet it keeps itself in sync with all the changes occurring on it. However, Cheryl had noticed the balance was becoming disturbed, showing up in not-so-subtle ways. While working in the kitchen, she continued daydreaming. She remembered how as a child December had been such an exciting, mystical time. She and her brother would count off the days on a special holiday calendar till Santa would come on Christmas morning. They both picked gifts they wanted out of the Sears Christmas catalog wish book. So, both she and her brother tried very hard to be good that month as Christmas came closer. 25 years later, the coin is flipped. She and her husband Joe are now the parents of 3 sons. With that comes concerns and struggle with money, work, and day-to-day crisis. Decembers have taken on a new light for her. The boys have come to know what a materialistic world they live in. Now, in their desire for things, they realize it is not always achievable. However, they know they are loved, and the values of family. Cheryl knew that this gift to them is the most important one that she and Joe could give to their children, and it would stand up to the test of time. The low feeling of winter looming over her lifted at this thought. She felt the boys would be strong and prepared for what life had in store for them. Cheryl's mind jolted back to the present and the kitchen as her youngest son came bursting through the kitchen door. "Mom, would you take me to the gas station to get some candy?" "Not now, Travis. I've got to get this dishwasher emptied and dinner started," Cheryl said. She watched out of the corner of her eye at his expression of disappointment. Then suddenly, his look changed to the look of, "I knew she wouldn't do it." "Is your homework done yet?" Cheryl asked. Cheryl knew it hadn't been, and it would get him out of her hair for a while. As he began to complain, she interrupted and said, "Then get upstairs and do it." He left the kitchen mumbling under his breath about having spelling words to go over. She and Joe worried about Travis in school. He was so gifted in working with his hands and had such a curiosity about how things worked. He would spend hours pulling things apart and putting them back together again. His teacher said he was very willing to participate in class, but his reading slowed him down in keeping up with the other students. Being dyslexic like his father made his self-confidence low and caused an inner struggle to master this stumbling block, a constant battle for him. Cheryl walked across the kitchen to the refrigerator, thinking of what to make for dinner, shrugging off her worries of her son. "He'll be all right." Opening the refrigerator door, sighing, she felt the day had gotten away from her. Cleaning the house up turned into an all-day job, and as she did these tasks anymore, they seemed so senseless and mundane. As if there was something else more pressing to do, it had been nagging at her more and more lately. The mere unsettledness of it had become almost a sense of urgency recently. But what? "Am I losing my mind?" she thought. Then she giggled to herself. Joe would call it one of those PMS mood swings of hers. Later that evening, Cheryl had prepared dinner, deciding on hot dogs. She called the boys to eat. Joe had arrived home from work and was relaxing in the living room. Travis and his brother Tanner were upstairs arguing over a Sega game. If that game could incorporate homework values, Cheryl thought to herself, millions of parents would be forever in their debt. Shane, their oldest son, was working late that night. Oh well, he can pop something in the microwave when he gets home, Cheryl thought as she was preparing Joe's dish. She called Joe from the living room. "Joe, come and get your plate, honey." Then she walked into the foyer and yelled up the stairs, "Boys, last call dinner." She returned to the kitchen. Max, their poodle, looked up at her as if to ask, where was his supper? "Okay, Max, come on and I'll feed you." She laughed at his response, leaping around the kitchen like some wind-up toy. After satisfying the poodle's needs, she joined Joe and the boys in the living room to eat her dinner in front of the TV. Max curled up next to her on the sofa as she settled down to eat her meal. While biting into her hot dog, she thought back to her childhood again, waiting for her father to get home in the evenings at 6 p.m. like clockwork. Cheryl would have the table set. This was her personal chore as a little girl before his punctual entrance each evening. The mealtime ritual consisted of she and her younger brother listening to their parents discuss their day's activities. Mostly Dad would fill Mother in on what happened at the office. Dad had a game he would play with she and her brother, guessing what Dad had for lunch that day. Dad would give some initials, and she and her brother would guess as to what it was. He would say H with LT and FF, which would translate to hamburger with lettuce, tomato, and French fries. Cheryl remembered she was quite good at this game and caught on to the fact her father ate certain things on particular days of the week. For some reason, her brother never caught on, or he just didn't really care all that much about the game. As she pondered this a bit more, swallowing her hot dog, she thought again. Was it that she became accustomed to her father's eating habits during the week? Or was it the fact she could actually see him eating at the places? Sirens blared from the TV that brought Cheryl back to her living room. The program was about the police solving crimes in different states of the country. Tanner, their 13-year-old, said, "Man, that guy looks straight at that cop and lies about not having any dope or weapons." Joe stated, "They all lie, like you can't tell they're stoned." Joe went on, "This world is getting crazier by the day. You can't move anywhere these days and feel safe." Cheryl looked around at her family sitting there in the living room with her and thought to herself, what do our sons have to look forward to in their future? Will they be able to support themselves? Will they wish to bring children into this world of utter confusion? Jo, and she had a plan many years ago, a house of their own and a family to raise together. Their children would at least have it as good as they did, and hopefully better. The plan was a simple one, they thought at the time. Find a good job and build from there. But it wasn't like that at all. No, it was military life for 14 years. Then civilian life with job after job, looking for something that would be stable and support a family. All their dreams disappeared one by one, or just kept out of their reach to obtain. They found themselves just settling for a roof over their heads, food on the table, and keeping up with the utilities. They felt like failures till they started looking around themselves and listening to friends and even strangers discussing their own hard times. Everyone is hurting in all areas of their lives. A huge void was growing where there had once been expectations and dreams. It seemed like everyone was holding on to the hope that it's got to get better. Jo and she had gotten this far together because they were a team. They believed in each other and could face anything as long as they remained a team. And you have. The voice said, prepare now, the time is near at hand. Cheryl almost choked on her French fry. Where did that come from? Then that sense of urgency overwhelmed her to the point that tears started to well up in her eyes, a muffled sound rising from deep within her soul past her lips. Cheryl said in a whisper, almost inaudibly, "Oh God, what is this?" After dinner, Jo took Tanner and Travis to their weekly Boy Scout meeting. Cheryl was in the kitchen cleaning up the dinner dishes as Shane, their oldest, walked in the kitchen door. He looked quite handsome and grown up in his white shirt and dark slacks his dad loaned him for his new job at the supermarket. "Hey Mom, what's for dinner?"
Cheryl said.
"We had hot dogs tonight. It's Scout night, so I just whipped up something quick. You can have that or nuke up some leftovers from Sunday's dinner. It's in the fridge." Shane looked at her, showing concern. "What's wrong, Mama? Are you mad at somebody?"
"No, Shane."
Cheryl assured him. "I am just tired," she said. "I'm gonna fix myself a cup of hot tea and go upstairs and watch some TV. Clean up after yourself here when you're done and then put the dogs out for me, okay?"
"Sure,"
he said, as he stuck his head in the refrigerator, deciding on what to devour first. As Cheryl headed upstairs with her tea, she made a mental note to tell Jo to leave her some cash in the morning so she could get some groceries, and she was almost out of cigarettes. When she reached her room, she closed the door behind her, and in the darkness, she lit up a cigarette and took a long drag. She watched the red glow of the ash and thought about what happened downstairs earlier that evening during dinner. "I'm not losing my mind. This is really happening. But I don't understand it. Am I having some sort of religious experience?" She had read of people having such experiences. She and her husband Jo believed in a higher being. But as others, they stopped searching different churches and religions. It occurred to them, it seemed each church had their own version of what God wanted them to know. They found the Bible had so many different translations and slants on the word of spirit. It depended on the individual and the church as to what was truth of the word of God. As she flicked the ash from her cigarette into the ashtray, she thought how Jo and she had brought the boys up in believing in God, and the fact you don't have to go to church to practice his teachings or to be in contact with him. In the silence of the room, Cheryl cautiously murmured, "Are you trying to tell me something? You've got to make it simple. I need to know if this is for real," she said sheepishly. And then, as if she thought better of herself, she said out loud, "This is crazy." Cheryl ground out her cigarette in the ashtray and felt her way through the dark bedroom to the adjoining master bathroom. She flicked on the light switch, and the light blinded her for a second after the darkness of the other room. She went over to the bathtub, reaching for the faucet and thinking to herself, "Make it warm, very warm." She realized she had a chill that she wanted to shake. Cheryl undressed and looked in the full-length mirror on the bathroom door. Her 39 years had been kind to her. People couldn't believe she was a mother of 3, let alone being 39, if she could only quit the damn cigarettes. She hated not being in control, and the habit had a hold on her. Good Cheryl would teasingly tell her girlfriend Nancy that if she ever quit, her family would probably ship her off somewhere. Joe would say, "You're such a bitch when you're out of cigarettes," to which she would come right back with, "Well, you're no picnic either when you're out." Cheryl slipped into thought while sinking into the soothing warm water. They seemed so harmless when she was a teenager. It was cool then. Both her parents smoked. It was a sign of maturity back when, a passage into adulthood for teenagers. Now it's a sign of weakness in her mind, and she hated the fact it had gotten the better of her. As she sunk deeper into the warm abyss, she thought of Joe coming home soon with Tanner and Travis. She sat up as the bubbles from her bath foamed over the edge of the tub and reached for her mug of tea and sipped the warm, soothing liquid appreciatively. Carefully putting her mug of tea down on the edge of the tub, she slid back down into the bubbly water and thought to herself she would feel better after she was laying in Joe's big, strong arms later. A sense of well-being came over her as she lay in total comfort and relaxation, as if she were a kitten purring. She and Joe had been meant for each other. They had a bond that went further than sexual and more meaningful than any friendship, total respect of each other's space. It was as if they were one, and by some freak of nature, they split as man and woman and were destined to join together as spouses. As she began to reminisce in her past with Joe, a loud knock on the bathroom door interrupted her tranquility. "Hey, Mom." The door slowly cracked open a bit. "Yes, Travis," she said. "We're back. Can I have some dessert now?" he asked. "Yes. And then get cleaned up and brush your teeth and ready for bed," Cheryl said lazily. "Oh, and tomorrow will you take me to the gas station to get some candy before school?" Travis asked in a rushed manner. "I guess," she said, and the door closed quietly. "I love you, Mom," he yelled as he went bounding down the hall. "Kids," Cheryl thought amusingly, as she submerged her head into the warm abyss. Chapter 2. The Last Day. The next morning, Cheryl opened her eyes to the sound of her alarm clock radio blaring some oldie but goodie tune. It was still early, only 6:30 a.m. She turned her head, looking at the empty spot where Joe had slept, still warm, and his masculine scent still clung to the sheets. He must have slipped out early, she thought disappointedly. He did not want to wake her. They had made love the night before, and it was still fresh on her mind. As she allowed herself to recount last evening, as his male scent was still present, she felt herself longing for him. She usually would be aware of him getting up in the mornings. She liked watching him fumble around for his clothing, not knowing she was watching him. This morning, she felt a sort of sorrow. She did not get to say goodbye. She glanced at the clock. It was almost 7 o'clock. She pushed back the sheets and slid out of the warm bed onto the cold wooden floor. In her bare feet, she crossed the room and reached for her robe on the rocking chair and slipped it on. She then headed for the bedroom door and opened it to cross the hall to Travis' room and tapped on it gently. "You awake, Trav?"
Respecting his privacy now that he was older.
"It's time to get up,"
"Okay, Mom, I'm awake,"
said a sleepy voice on the other side of the door. She went further down the hall to Tanner's room and roused him out of bed, and then returned to her bedroom. Max, her poodle, was anxiously waiting for her to slip into her jeans and throw on a sweatshirt. Max was busy doing his poodle morning ritual, jumping around the room full of energy with her Rottweiler Higgins, who majestically sat watching Max's foolish antics. As they raced past her down the long staircase, Cheryl wondered why their dogs appeared so happy each morning, as if they appreciated each new day. What a shame human beings didn't have the knack of such a simple thing.
she thought as she opened the back door to let them outside.
We probably did slow down to notice things like that once upon a time, way back when she thought.
Cheryl answered herself.
Before all the everyday violence, corruption, disasters that we have to live through each and every day now.
She tuned it out and went on with the opinion that it happens to other people and in other places.
It can't be ignored anymore,
She said out loud.
and then she heard somewhere in the back of her mind again.
It's gone too far to ever go back. Get your family ready for spirit.
She looked around the kitchen, but she was alone, and before she could steady herself, Travis and Tanner came stumbling down from upstairs into the kitchen.
Cheryl quickly turned away from them to make herself a cup of coffee.
So they could not see her face. If they were to have noticed, they would have seen all the color from her face drained. The boys were busy making themselves cereal as she sat down at the kitchen table with her coffee. There was a note on the table from Shane. She picked up and read his message being, he had a ride home from school today, and she did not need to pick him up.
Cheryl tried to forget the voices and busy herself in going over what errands she had to run that day after work at the clinic. She had worked at the animal hospital for 4 years now.
Her hours fit in around the boys' school schedule, but today they seemed to be running late. It seemed like everyone in the house had a restless night of sleep. She was still sleepy.
The boys let the dogs in and took care of their breakfast dishes, while Cheryl got her keys and purse.
"Grab your jackets, guys, and let's go,"
she said, and she headed out the back door.
The air was still, and the skies looked foreboding. Cheryl had a sensation that something was about to happen. It sent goosebumps all over her body. They all piled into her minivan, and Cheryl shoved back the uneasiness and started the truck. As they were backing out of the driveway, she looked down at the gas gauge and said, "Shit, we've got to stop for gas first."
Travis, sitting in the back seat of the van, sat smiling.
"Hey, Mom, can I?" At 9 a.m., Shane had his head down on his desk in his first period science class. The room was filled with noise as students were waiting for the bell to ring. 2 girls sitting in front of him were comparing notes on their weekend dates.
Shane lifted his head and watched his friend Eddie across the room
teasingly dare Mary to open the teacher's cabinet door. Mr. Sutton, their teacher and football line coach, kept a dead mummified cat in the cabinet, which Mr. Sutton used in his biology classes. Shane remembered his mother's reaction to it when someone accidentally opened the cabinet on Parents' Night. As he was considering some amusing pranks one could pull off with the carcass, the bell rang for class to begin. Mr. Sutton was standing at the front of the class trying to create some semblance of order. Shane hated first period. It was too hard to concentrate on anything this early in the morning. He put his head back down on his desk and was thinking about the upcoming football game that Friday. He was hoping his girlfriend Kathy would be there. Just knowing she was in the stands made him want to pull off a great play. He had made varsity team this year, and around the same time he had met Kathy. She went to a rival school, which made him feel even better about himself having her for a girlfriend. He had dated a few girls in the past 2 years, but Kathy was different. He felt comfortable around her. Shane lifted his head from the desk again, after being nudged by his friend Eddie, who had taken the seat next to him. Eddie whispered, "Can I catch a ride with you to work today?"
Shane replied,
"Yeah, I guess so. I'm taking the late bus home after football practice. Meet us at the field house. After I go home to change for work, Leon is going to take me to work."
"Thanks, man,"
Eddie uttered.
"Do you believe this crap coach is talking about?"
Shane looked up to the front of the room to see what Eddie was going on about. Mr. Sutton continued, "Now, theologians tell us that the Bible says there will come a time when the world as we know it will cease to be." Mr. Sutton moved over to his desk and sat on the corner of it.
He explained there would be wars and the planet will go crazy with tornadoes and volcanoes erupting. Man and wildlife will suffer greatly at the hands of what is being called Armageddon.
There was snickering throughout the classroom. Shane recalled having family discussions on this. His parents told he and his brothers many signs of these events were already happening.
Well, that's an abbreviated version.
Mr. Sutton cleared his throat as if uneasy.
Science doesn't always jive with what the Bible states.
They have been at odds for as long as man started keeping records of science and its discoveries. If it cannot be tangibly proven, then it cannot be so, is the belief in the science fields.
However, and Mr. Sutton stood up, becoming enthusiastic,
scientists have released studies now that in the year 2005, all the planets will be in such an alignment that has never before been recorded.
Now, I am not saying that the end of the world is coming,
but it will create some havoc since the gravity pull from the planets will play a part in affecting our weather. Perhaps we will see landform changes and inactive volcanoes becoming active again.
Man doesn't know what new landforms could be created or what exact effect it could have on present land formations.
We can only speculate. This could be what the Book of Revelations was describing, and there are some avid individuals who are preparing for this to happen. Some individuals are preparing their homes for just such a disturbance. Others decided to be in different areas, and some in the sky. for safety.
The class laughed, and someone called out,
And what if there's nothing left to land on? The room fell silent. Mr. Sutton looked around the room.
"Well, personally, I don't believe it will be that serious of an event."
There have always been doomsday fanatics who preach the end of the world, and their prophecies have come and gone, and we are still here. Shane's attention wandered as Mr. Sutton was writing the homework assignment on the chalkboard. Shane wondered about what it would be like, starting all over again. He always thought it would be cool to live in the Wild West days, or even the Stone Age with the dinosaurs. As he was visualizing and fantasizing himself in such places, a statement popped into his head, interrupting his daydreaming. It won't be like that. It won't be anything like man's interpretation of God's word. However, God's will is about to be done. Shane sat straight up in his seat.
Wow, where did that come from?
He felt like an electrical charge had been sent right through his body. Eddie, seeing Shane's sudden bolt in the chair, started laughing.
Hey, what's with you?
The bell rang just then for classes to change. Joe had left early that morning for work. He dropped Shane off at the high school and then headed to the bank. He drove up to the drive-thru to get some cash. He had left Cheryl his last 20 for groceries. He was beginning to feel the crunch of December, getting bills paid, and still have something left over for a Christmas for the boys. He was due for a review of his performance at work. He was hoping it was going to happen the beginning of the month. A pay raise would sure make things go a lot smoother about now, but it didn't look like he was going to see anything till after the first of the year now, and he didn't want to make waves at his new job. This company he was working for was one of the best opportunities that had come his way since he retired from the military service.
As he pulled up next to the automatic teller machine, he noticed what looked like bloodstains on the wall. Joe looked around but didn't see anybody. Across the parking lot of the bank, there were cars parked at the Beefers restaurant.
He pulled out his bank card to slip into the machine and waited for the computer to come online. He wondered if somebody was attacked the night before or early in the morning when they tried to use the teller machine. Joe didn't feel comfortable living in this area, but there really wasn't anywhere that wasn't crime-free. He still wasn't used to the sirens blaring at all times of the day and night. Helicopters loomed over his block at night, with spotlights looking for their perpetrator. Joe watched the TV and read in the paper how the local gangs were killing innocent children. He'd seen their graffiti on the buildings up and down the streets.
People were moving out to the outer areas to get away from it, but the wave of drugs and murders were spilling out into the suburbs now too. The teller machine spit out Joe's money, and he put it in his wallet along with his bank card and drove his truck out onto the highway.
He thought how it had touched his family. His sons are in schools that had gang fights cropping up in the middle of the halls. Shane had lost 2 friends in the last few years since they moved out to Texas due to gang violence. Police patrolled the schools with dogs. Metal detectors had been installed at the schools. To go to a high school football game, you had to go through metal detectors, and at away games, police escorted the teams.
As Joe was pulling into the parking lot of his office building, he thought to himself,
I'm really tired of the whole scene, and I hate all the prejudices.
the world is totally out of control, and he felt helpless as it was bigger than him.
What is a person like himself to do?
He guessed just keep on the best way he knew how. It was so damn depressing.
It was already 5 p.m., and Joe was still at his desk in the lab. He was on the phone listening to Christmas carols serenading him while he was kept on hold.
Here he's been out of the service for several years, and he's still dealing with military red tape.
A monotone voice came from the other end of the line. Mr. Brown, I'm sorry for the delay.
Now tell me how I can help you.
Joe thought I've only been on the phone with you people for 4 days now, trying to get the same piece of information.
Joe said, getting an agitation in his voice. He was fully aware of my company sent some refrigerant components out to the base 2 years ago before the base found out it was going to be closed. Now I realize that all the troops have been cleared out and there aren't any personnel left to handle this transaction. We never received the components back, so somebody still has them, and we'd like our money or the components back.
There was an uneasy silence on the other end of the line.
Look, Joe said,
I was given this number after numerous conversations with the Department of Defense. I didn't know there was anybody even out there on the base still till now.
can I at least come out there and talk with someone in charge?
Maybe the stuff is sitting in some warehouse out there.
The voice cut in.
No, sir, that is not possible. The base is off limits to all civilian personnel. There's no one out here but a skeleton crew. As you know, there are negotiations in the works for the Navy and Air Force Reserve to take over the base.
However, I will look into this matter and get back to you when I find out something.
There was a click, and Joe was left listening to dead air on the line, and then a dial tone.
He hung up the receiver.
The bitch! He murdered murmured.
What the hell is going on out there? What's so top secret?
He'd been out there 2 months ago to use the commissary. The place was dead, but he didn't notice anything unusual.
He didn't know the base had been put off limits to him.
There wasn't anything in the paper or on the news about it.
Maybe he'll just call the local TV station and have them check into it.
Meanwhile, he better let his boss know he hadn't gotten anywhere on the components. He had an afterthought.
Better call Cheryl first to let her know he was gonna be late, missing her all of a sudden.
He thought, damn, wish I had woken her this morning to say goodbye. Chapter 3: Secrets. The staff sergeant hung up the phone and swung around in her chair to face the AFC sitting at the desk behind her. I'm sick of this cloak and dagger shit. I felt like a real ass talking to that guy. Why are we supposed to cover these civilian SOBs? These scientists are civilians, for Christ's sake. They've taken over the base. It looks like mission control out there for NASA, and we're here to cater to their every whim. They've flown in more computer shit today. The aircraft carriers are loaded with it. I know the media is going to catch wind of this. It's only a matter of time. The private put out a cigarette and said, "They've only been here a few weeks. Our briefing said they were coming in and going out. It was hush, hush, and they wouldn't be here for very long. The whole thing would be over before the media stuck their nosy reporters on us." The phone rang again, and the AFC picked it up. He listened to the person on the other end of the phone for a second, and then looked over at the staff sergeant. "Ma'am, it's the MPs at the front gate. Some joker has a semi full of high-powered telescopes, says he has a pass." The sergeant punched some keys on her computer and then said, "Yeah, he was supposed to have been here this morning. Let him through and send him over to the back carriers. I had one of those Einsteins on my back all morning looking for that shipment." The MP put the phone down and stepped out of the guardhouse and over to the black rig. He looked up at the driver in the cab of the truck and handed the driver back his pass. He said, "Okay, you're clear. They've been expecting you since morning. You will be escorted in. Follow the escort on this road. Go right and turn into the hangars lot. There will be someone there to show you where the unloading area is. Do not deviate from your escort or you will have arms drawn on you. Do you understand?"
"Thanks," the driver said as he put the truck in gear.
He began to follow the MP escort. He was dog-tired and had been on the road for days, all the way from New York. This had been a special priority run, and he was told his cargo was top secret. The pay was good, so what the heck? It was better than being home, listening to the old lady complain about his not working. Times are rough. He told her Texas sounded like a warm place to be for now. The old lady told him to get off his backside and get a hauling job. As he got to the T in the road and made his right turn, he thought to himself, man, this place is empty. He sort of remembered that this place had been axed by Congress, so what's going on here now? They'll probably use it to house the homeless, or maybe turn it into a shopping center. Just what the world needs another mall, he chuckled to himself.
As he pulled up to the entrance of the hangar area, he said to himself,
well, somebody is using it for something.
The escort motioned him to pull over and stop.
He parked the rig and got out of the truck cab to stretch his now numb legs.
Another MP walked over to him as the escort drove off, lights filling the night skies with blues and whites and reds from the patrol cars.
The MP said, "One of my men will move the truck to unload it. May I have your keys, sir?"
"Hell no."
The trucker said, "That's my rig, and nobody drives her but me."
The MP looked at him, eyes piercing from underneath his helmet.
"Nobody goes past this point unless authorized. This is a military installation, and I have the authority to put you under arrest if you do not cooperate."
Then he added as if with an afterthought,
"Besides, you don't get paid if the stuff doesn't get offloaded."
The driver thought about it for a second, and then said, handing his keys over to the MP,
"All right, but if there's so much as a scratch on her, the military just bought itself a $150,000 rig."
The officer nodded and pointed to a shack across the carrier lot.
"You can go in there and get some hot coffee while you wait."
The driver walked over to the shack and entered.
There was another individual in the building wearing civilian clothes, sipping a steaming cup of coffee out of a styrofoam cup.
Then walked over to the coffee pot
and poured himself a cup, looking over his shoulder as he was setting the coffee pot back down.
He spoke,
"How do?" I'm Matt. Are you here dropping off a load too?
The stranger replied.
The name is Charles. Came in out of Florida.
Matt said, "You know what's going on here."
Charles said, they take your rig too, huh? I never seen such an operation like this before.
Matt replied,
Uh-huh. Guess you can't argue with Uncle Sam. What's going on here anyhow?
"This place is giving me the creeps."
I don't know, said Charles, but I see a lot of guys wandering around out there in lab coats. They must be some kind of scientists. I've been here cooling my heels for an hour and a half now.
Matt said in a low voice.
Wanna go take a look, see?
Charles said,
They told me to stay put till they brought the truck back around.
"Hell."
Matt said, what can it hurt? We're not wearing any goddamn monkey suits and they can't keep us held up in here. Let's go.
"Okay, I'm game."
Said Charles, and the two men stepped out into the chilled night. It was pretty dark where they were at, except for the street lamp out in front of the MP shack. There weren't any lights on the runways for planes, with the hangars on either side of the runway for planes. The only light on the runways was coming from the full moon that night, but there seemed to be bright light streaming from the cracks of the hangar doors at each hangar. Matt saw his rig halfway up the runway from them, parked in front of one of the cargo doors. He hugged the buildings in the shadows and headed up to his truck, with Charles following silently. They could hear a lot of voices at each hangar they passed, and machinery like computers beeping and buzzing as they were being put up online, the men guessed. The two men could not see anything through the cracks in the doors they passed, and the windows were blacked out with paint. When they got closer to Matt's truck, the doors to one of the hangars started opening slowly. It was not a manual door. They could hear the motor humming and a chain rattle as the massive door opened wider and wider. A brilliant light from inside poured out into the night as the door raised up. The light lit up the runway like it was broad day again. Matt and Charles hid in the shadows and watched and listened. A figure with a lab coat came out with several MPs from the building. Matt could tell by some of the conversation that the guy in the lab coat was the one running this show. They couldn't catch all of the conversation. The lab coat seemed quite excited over the shipment, and he was using a lot of arms and hand gestures. Apparently, he was quite pleased. As Matt, with Charles following, crept closer in the shadows, they heard the lab coat say, "We'll know exactly when it'll happen. It's a once-in-a-lifetime chance." Another lab coat came out of the hangar with a streaming light. Matt could see a little more past the hangar door. He saw all kinds of computers, and lab coats filled the place. They were computers in front of huge monitors with headphones on and talking into walkie-talkies. The second lab coat that came out of the hangar reprimanded the first that was standing out in the runway. He was telling him to be quiet. This project is not to be discussed with the MPs. The two lab coats walked back towards the hangar after giving orders to the MPs to unload the truck quickly. They were told to get the truck out of there pronto. Matt edged up a little closer as the truck was being unloaded and strained to hear what the conversation was about. He heard bits and pieces. It was difficult with the forklift making noise and all the sounds coming out of the hangar, but what he caught sent chills up his spine. Two of the MPs closest to Matt's vantage point were saying, "Man, I already told my old lady to pick the kids up and head up to Colorado. My dad has a cabin up there. He left me when he passed away. I've got that place stockpiled, and as soon as I get wind of this thing happening, I'm AWOL, man, and I'll meet them up there." The other MP said, "I heard it'll be okay. The weather will get a little wild, but it's not the end of the world." "Shit," said another of their buddies walking up to the two. "I heard one of those crazy scientists talking. He's got a goddamn plane waiting for him and his pals to ride it out. I am a God-fearing man, and if it's my time, then it's my time. Don't matter where you are. If God's gonna take you, he'll find you. Most of the poor saps out there that's rotting with their own demons will rot down here, and the rest will be looking down and watching this whole crazy world collapse." "Oh yeah," somebody said from a truck. "And just where will you be?" The MP said jokingly, "In the right place and at the right time, I hope." Matt gestured to Charles to move back, and the two men swiftly but silently made their way back to the shack without being detected. They walked back into the shack, and Charles headed for the coffee pot, saying, "Man, it sure is cold out there." Matt lunged forward towards Charles and grabbed his arm and swung him around. Charles, startled and becoming defensive, said, "Hey man, what's with you?" Matt looked at him and said, in a tone that bordered on hysteria, Chapter 4. The Exist. The 3 o'clock last period bell rang. Shane pushed away from his desk, grabbed his books, and headed towards the school hallway. His buddies were waiting for him by his locker. The guys were feeling pretty pumped up for football practice after a boring day at school. A couple of the guys said, "We better not be late on the field." Shane had seen the coach's notice on the bulletin board for the team that morning. It read, "Anyone late today will be doing extra laps after practice." They had a big game coming that weekend. Coach was always grouchy before a game with the local rival team. They had not won against Riverside 3 years straight. Shane and his buddies got to the locker room to change into their scrimmage gear. It took about 5 or 10 minutes to do some warm-up reps and then headed out to the field. As they ran outside onto the practice field, the air felt heavy under the gray sky as the field lights came on. You could tell a storm was brewing. Fort Worth doesn't get snow, but it gets ice storms in December. It was too warm for ice, but it felt like stillness before a tornado. Shane and his teammates saw lightning in the sky. "Oh great," Shane's friend Tracy said. The coach blew his whistle and called out, "Practice is canceled, guys. Hit the showers and catch the late bus. We'll see you tomorrow morning on the field, 7 a.m. sharp." As Shane headed to the bus, he noticed a stronger wind blowing the litter around the parking lot in little mini twisters. Shane got on the bus thinking, "Hope Mom's home now. God, I'm starving." After school, Tanner and Travis walked over to Tanner's friend Chad's house around 4:30. Chad's mom, Nancy, was a close friend of Cheryl's. They lived only 5 minutes apart, and the boys stayed there after school till Cheryl got home from work. Once they got to Chad's, he wanted Tanner to see the new video game he rented to play. The 3 boys were taking turns playing against each other with the virtual reality game in the living room. Tanner started laughing at his brother. "Travis, sit still. You're gonna pull the cord out of the game system." He watched Travis squirming around on the floor as he was making his video game character jump hazards in the game. Travis pushed his glasses up his nose with the back of his wrist, which he was holding the game paddle with. "Shut up," he said to his brother. Chad got up shaking his head and headed to the kitchen for something to eat. When Chad came back out to the living room with some popcorn, he said, "My mom said, we're starting to get a storm outside. You guys don't leave for your house. We'll drive you home before dinner when my dad gets home." Tanner said, "Cool. Hey Chad, look at this new level we found. Travis just got 40 points. At 5 p.m. Cheryl was in her van returning from the grocery store. She had picked up a few things for dinner after work. She woke up that morning with an ominous feeling that just would not let her alone. In her head, the voice was saying, "Don't be frightened. When it comes, we are here with you. Just believe." There was electricity in the air that evening, and the temperatures began plummeting quickly as she sensed a storm was brewing. She thought, "It's gonna be a bad one tonight. I better hurry home before it starts hailing. I've got to get the van in some cover." Cheryl arrived home and drove the van inside the garage, grabbed her groceries, and headed for the house. She fumbled for her keys to open the back door of the house, trying to balance the grocery bags as the wind started to pick up. It pushed her through the threshold into the kitchen. The bags of groceries fell to the floor as she used all her weight to shove the back door closed. Her poodle was there at the door to greet her, as usual, but looked up at her as if he also knew this wasn't any ordinary storm coming. She tried to calm herself, worrying about the boys and her husband, as she was looking down at all the groceries on the floor in disarray. She started picking up her packages and putting the food in the fridge, but the kitchen was dark, so she went to the light switch to turn on a light. Nervously startled from the wind howling outside as lightning lit up the sky, the sounds from outside grew louder, and a siren far off in the distance started wailing. "Damn," Cheryl muttered, "tornado alert." And she crossed the room to turn on the radio, then reached for the phone on the kitchen wall to call Nancy about getting her boys to the house. The voice in her head announced, "It is time. Please don't be frightened." Cheryl shuddered. Am I losing my mind? But a wave of warmth enveloped her body with a familiar feeling of tranquility and peace. Where have I felt like this before? It dawned on her. It was almost like herself talking to her from someplace else. Not having the time to contemplate this, her attention was brought to the fact that the floor beneath her was shaking. Things in the kitchen cabinets began falling out, and the lights went out. In the darkness, she could hear, as she was trying to remain on her feet, the windows rattling from the forces outside the house. All of a sudden, the windows in the back door gave way and blew in. Sounds of broken glass spewing in shards through the room terrified Cheryl. She was thrown to the floor, and her dog was running for cover under a table that was skidding across the room. The wind now was blowing at such a high pitch that it was ear-piercing, and the rain was coming in through the holes in the walls that once was windows and sheets. Cheryl trembled with cold and fear as she tried to get back up onto her feet. All she could manage to do was stay down and crawl as the floor moved like a funhouse in a carnival. "Oh my God, my children!" she thought. "I have to get to them. Where is Joe? I can't stay here. I have to find them." As she grabbed a chair that was whizzing by towards her across the floor, she tried to pull herself upright, only to be flung to a corner of the room. She realized she didn't have the strength against the forces that surrounded her, and she was frightened and alone with no one to help her. Cheryl screamed with tears streaming down her face, and she heard herself letting out a blood-curdling yell for Joe, Joe, Joe! Then the voice in her head said, "Believe in the Creator. You knew of this coming. Now allow us to take you home, Cheryl." She screamed back at the voice as she was holding her head. "I am home. I want my family." The voice said, "They will be with you soon. Now, are you ready?" As she was about to blurt out, "No, leave me alone," a memory of something familiar popped into her head, as if she has lived this moment in a dream or something. She wasn't quite sure what it was or where, and as the room began to spin before her, she felt that heat again, wrapping her whole entire body, and she wasn't cold anymore. The fear had been lifted from her, and she felt as though she was in the arms of something that was emanating a powerful maternal love and safety. The sounds of the wind began to fade further and further away. She simply gave in to the pleasant sensation of floating and the warmth of security that was gently lifting her, as if she was as light as a feather. The last thing she could see was a bright white light surrounding her, blinding her to the point she had to cover her eyes with her hands. Cheryl raised her hands to her face, and she thought she detected a figure looming towards her side. As she covered her stinging eyes, she felt the presence of this figure standing right before her now. And it said to her, "We've been waiting. Are you ready to come with us, Cheryl?" She recognized the voice. It was the voice she heard so often lately in her head, but not the one who sounded like herself, trying to comfort her. This time, this voice wasn't one of annoyance, and she even thought it had a tone of a long-lost friend. "From where?" Cheryl simply replied, "Yes." She knew at that very moment that this was what she knew was coming. Somehow, she had always known, and it was a comfort that it had finally come to pass. Chapter 5. The Cleansing. There was a hush in the air. Expectation and energy of a greater power exudes and permeates throughout the lands. Where there once had been light is only darkness, a darkness as never before. Not a light shining anywhere to shed upon the disaster of all disasters of devastation worldwide. Where there were whole continents, there is no more. The oceans had covered places that once held life, and even the oceans seemed to be dead with bubbling steam. The vapors lifted into the darkness cynically. The lapping of the waves on deserted black beaches echo in the still of the dark. The heavens have no moon or stars, just a rank odor of death and destruction. What land that survived the shift of the oceans is in some areas smoldering. If there had been an area of habitation left of man, it was now nothing but rubble with smoldering fires. Vegetation that survived were charred and or blown over, trampled by the Creator's swift hand. Mother Nature smothered with black soot from the ashes that were still falling from the skies above. Lightning streaked through the dark skies as if it was searching for a place to strike that had not been touched yet. Only all had been touched. If one was to listen to the winds blowing, it was almost as if Satan himself was bellowing aloud his approval of the status of mankind from his throne of his negativity and destruction. The end of life here, as we know it, came suddenly. Without the warning signs of it breaking loose, it came unannounced. The heavens darkened and the hand of change came swiftly, and as it descended, there was chaos among the masses. Fires engulfed buildings, people shoved and pushed, trying to flee the cities and towns. Looters pillaged the empty buildings to take, but it was all for naught. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to take many of the stolen things. Death was all around. There were men, women, and children screaming in fear, automobiles stuck in miles and miles of gridlock trying to flee. There were crumbling cities and towns, nowhere to go as the ground underneath them shook and cracked open, swallowing up whatever it could catch in its crevices. Those who took refuge in the skies in planes or jets, they simply plummeted to their demise into the ground. The wildlife fared no better. Birds fell from the skies to their deaths, the domestic animals mostly charred by fires or were trampled, and others run over by human beings fleeing in hysteria. Wildlife in the mountains and jungles were stampeded into a frenzy fleeing fires or floods that engulfed their habitats if the earth didn't just swallow them up. Some mountains sunk into the ground, some became angry, spewing volcanic monsters. The lava flowed over villages and towns into jungles, over cities of steel until it found its way to the seas. Ocean creatures floated to the top of the rough seas. Death came as the ocean's temperatures changed to boiling points. There were no more continents of recognition. The lines once drawn by man to separate and segregate existed no more. As time passed, the smoke dissipated, the ashes began to settle and oceans cooled. The earth stopped rumbling and there was once again stillness. Not one human being was left. Only a few creatures and insects held life's breath. Something else occurred simultaneously as the gates of Armageddon flung open. Another gate opened into a higher level. It is known by some as a higher vibration, enlightenment, a different dimension that runs parallel to this world. A dimensional porthole opened to the mirrored parallel Earth. There were many souls that had already entered this dimension prior to the Earth's transition, and it held its energy for others to follow. They held its energy along with light beings and entities that had prepared these places of energy and sent messengers to lead others to its gates. As those that were fleeing for their lives during the mass destruction, there were others that knew of this Earth event coming and had prepared themselves to move up into the new dimension, silently and quietly, without fear of what was happening around them. As an observer watching this great shift into this dimension, you would have seen the individuals just simply fade into nothingness. And if the aura could be seen, it would have appeared as a great white light surrounding their bodies. This other world was the prophesied heaven on earth, as ancient scripture and native elders spoke of a mirror image of the old world, only as it was intended to be by the Creator. The doors of knowledge held at bay for so many lifetimes, now wide open for our use. Earth and this new dimension were not the only places that were experiencing changes. Domains of the spirit worlds were also going through change, and each level was being adjusted to fit the needs of each soul that was to engage in yet another lesson. As an observer watching this great shift into this dimension, you would have seen the individuals just simply fade into nothingness. And if the aura could be seen, it would have appeared as a great white light surrounding their bodies. This other world was the prophesied heaven on earth, as ancient scripture and native elders spoke of a mirror image of the old world, only as it was intended to be by the Creator. The doors of knowledge held at bay for so many lifetimes, now wide open for our use.
Earth and this new dimension were not the only places that were experiencing changes. Domains of the spirit worlds were also going through change.
And each level was being adjusted to fit the needs of each soul that was to engage in yet another lesson. The guides and the masters were in waiting for those that had left Earth in death to readjust and become cleansed from their lessons of selfishness, hate, and destruction.
Others contracted in the spirit world to continue their life on the parallel world that mirrored their old one.
They came in as walk-ins and watchers to join human beings already there. Chapter 6. Coming Home. Cheryl felt and heard a buzzing in her head as she tried to open her eyelids. She was aware that she was no longer in the middle of the storm. She was beginning to find it hard to remember and focus on the house in the middle of what seemed like an earthquake. Was she dreaming? As she opened her eyes, she realized that she was not in her home in Texas anymore. She wasn't even sure if she was alive. She found herself standing in a great hall, and it was pretty apparent, even though her eyes were still hazy, that she must have indeed died. This place was grand and angelic, like a place that felt familiar to her soul. She tried to adjust her sight to make out the furnishings. It just felt like home. Everything was bright and vivid, white as white could be, but nothing seemed solid, just sort of wispy and airy, fragile and dreamlike. As she began to wonder while standing there taking in the hall, "Dare I move?" she felt a presence of someone coming close to her from a short distance behind her. Cheryl turned, but couldn't make out the figure yet. She could feel the buzzing in her head getting stronger, and the warmth once again engulfed her whole being. Her soul recognized this place, this energy next to her, and it exploded in response to its realization that it was home. As Cheryl stood there in awe, in a trance-like state, her higher self responded to its recognition of this being waiting to show itself. Cheryl observed her higher self emerge from her to mingle with the energy awaiting. The two energies exuded love and remembrance, which permeated this space and time, and the two exploded in brilliant colors of rainbows while vibrating to a rhythm and pitch that the Creator itself smiled upon. As the reunion subsided, the two huge energy sources parted and communicated in tones such as musical vibrations. Translated, it went something like this. Cheryl's higher self: "It is good to be back and see you again. I have had such longings to return home." Other entity replying, "Yes, it is good, but you know it is not for long. Only to raise your vibrations so you can attune yourself for the next part of your journey on Earth. You remember your contract and lesson is now at an end, and you must fulfill the prophecy. I envy you for this task you are about to embark on, as well as the others who will fulfill their paths. Do you feel the love around us? We are watching and recording all of this great period. Such a significance is put on this by the Creator." Cheryl's higher self sighed and said, "Yes, but it is so good to be home again. I am excited to embark on this momentous journey, however. I so miss it here." And with that, their two energies parted, and then the communications ended. There was much to prepare Cheryl's vessel, body, for the transition back. Though time there was much different than on Earth, everything had to be accomplished and noted quickly. While there, attuning, rest, and celebration would take place before Cheryl would go back to accomplish the goals set by her in contract. The essence of Cheryl went and took time to renew her contract with those who would be with her for the next period of transition. There was also time for reconnection of entities that Cheryl was connected to as a soul group. Much celebration took place. There were others there also that would go back with Cheryl to Earth to fulfill their contracts. All this would go into record in Cheryl's unconscious, not to be awakened to her till it was necessary to do so. What would be considered weeks in the spirit world was actually a decade in Earth time. During this time, Cheryl realigned with her higher self, preparing to gently return with the others to the awaiting world she had known as home. While in this transitional stage, Cheryl, with many others, not yet wearing their bodysuits, congregated in a staging room. No one could recognize anyone visually without their bodies. They could only recognize the energy next to them and around them in the room. A human being as they were before this would be a bizarre, disquieting situation. The walls of the room became a visual tool used by the voice that was instructing them. First of all, they were told all had contracted for this lifetime to do this. Not that they were any more special than other souls, but they requested this experience for soul growth and were eligible from past life experiences. What they will be creating is a place for their soul pods to eventually enter when they are ready. It was explained to them the transition of all things are being taken both here and other places and raising the vibration. The Earth they left has, as most places do, a parallel dual twin. More of the guided message continued. Some of you have had a slight peek now and then of this place in your old life and world. Most of you have been able to push past the veil and listen to us about this moment coming. Indeed, a few of you have time traveled or had out-of-body experiences in this other parallel. There were some who choose to stay and bring it to the point it is now for your entrance to help bring it to fruition. It is not perfection. Indeed, most flaws you had in your old world is there. Perfection would help you none in growth. Some of you are returning with your families, some not as walk-ins. Many will have friends come back with you, all of which you will recognize instantly upon return. This all of you contracted for. You will find the places you're placed in will not be where you came from originally, which all of you will remember. You will find planetary destruction has already started in this world. Many souls have left already in your earth term, death. Upon your return, each of you will begin to remember what we have shown you here and implement there to raise that realm's vibration. As walk-ins, you will come across some strange settings, prepared for you to begin. Empty homes with supplies, transportation for use to begin with, but not to rely on, because you shall bring change in time.
Many leaders of your countries are no more in order for change to occur. Some of you will be set down in places that you are capable of restructuring after natural disasters by the elements. The souls that are there already are prepared for change and expecting you. You will find your life force, or DNA in life terms, has been adjusted, lifespan has been tripled, and you will create ways to keep your vessels healthy. They are your temples, at least until you need them no more to hold your essence. The voice continued as the room walls focused a picture. Behold your old planet. What they all saw was nothing short of sickening. The planet completely swept clear of all life. In time, the voice of their instructor continued. This place will be used again for life to be experienced, but you are being given the opportunity to save this dual Earth from the same fate. The cosmos wants proof that the creation human being can steward this living Earth in which it was intended. If not, the human being will be no more. Then silence, and the room disappeared. Upon the paralleled planet, Spirit set down these individuals in contract all over in specific areas. Their energies descended back down on Earth in beams of brilliant bright orbs. Their bodies became solid again as they were earthbound. They lay where they had been gently deposited upon Mother Earth's ground, as their conscience awakened like from a sound sleep, and their senses came back. They remembered nothing up to a point of when they left old Earth. It was decided by them, while in the spirit world, that they gradually would come back to know their purpose on Earth, and what they were capable of with their new vibrations they acquired, just as foretold. When they had awakened from their slumber, many were still with their families, some alone. Some were in familiar surroundings, while others were completely in different geographical locations. All had contracted to be exactly where they were put, and with those they had accepted to be with in this journey. As with Cheryl, they too were not to remember this till it was time. Once they had awakened on Earth, they were devastated at the disarray of the planet's condition. Before the descent of the souls, the planet suffered some episodes of disaster. Much like their old world, this one had begun seeing massive storms. Therefore, some cities had been virtually demolished by tornadoes and hurricanes. Coastal areas had lost much of its beaches to storms and oceans rising from melted glaciers due to global warming. Many countries suffered changing climates, which affected their normal habits of life for survival. Water consumption by humans became problematic due to droughts. Death of humans and animals were leaving lands. Barren leaders of countries were disputing over oil, land, and religions, not focusing on Mother Nature's warnings. These were the world conditions these time travelers of souls were set down in. Some had to use their instincts for survival and rise up again, form the ashes, and start anew. But they were never in fear or dismay of the obstacles set before them. Spirit was always there for them to guide and love them in their contracts, in that they were an inspiration for all that were in contract with them. So they were admired for their strength and determination. Most of the hierarchy of countries that had their monopoly on government and money did not survive to continue their path of destruction. Although those left alive had to retreat back to basics in order to survive, there were still technologies out there. Man and technology would begin once again. It was destined as a purpose of learning and forward movement in lesson. In this realm, things would be salvaged and reconstructed.
communication via phone and computer would once again begin in the higher populated areas. The divine source saw it fitting in its infinite wisdom that all human beings surviving on the parallel Earth before the descent of the time travelers to slow their aging process. This was achieved simultaneously upon the arrival of Cheryl with her family and all the other souls in this contract. The human race needed time and physical strength with clear mind to achieve the shift changes needed. The world in this dimension would not become aware of the change in the aging process immediately, but it gave them approximately 10 years extension of prime life. They eventually would become aware of it through the medical field. They would find a DNA change in all the population that was 30 years of age and under before the shift.
All others who were older would age as they were before.
Spirit couldn't make too obvious a change.
The only other alteration was that all except Cheryl and her family shifting into this parallel Earth were walk-ins.
A walk-in is a soul vacating the body for another to replace it. Once the shift occurred, the planet subsided its erratic weather behavior and land movement for the time being in its new higher vibration. Chapter 7, Kara. Conception of the book. Computer goes to shut down. She watched the screen fade to black and pulled the disk out for safekeeping. Some 7 years ago, this story took on its life. One day, I sat down in front of the computer to start writing, using familiar individuals in my life as the characters. I allowed the text to weave its story. There was a writer's block in the storyline at one point. The reason being was this story was a joint project with an entity I had been working with in my automatic writing. So, once at this block in the script, it occurred to me to just start writing what led up to this book's conception. I had no idea of the storyline or preparation of it before I sat in front of a computer screen. Although it was written some 7 years ago, its probability of its concept coming to be a possibility for our planet is more readily believed plausible as a true possibility for us. Now, with each war and each planetary disruption, I see just how easy it could happen these days as opposed to the time I wrote it. Knowing that there are others out there writing much the same message or giving lectures on it, perhaps this book will be understood and help change the tides of mankind. It is time for us to prepare ourselves on soul level for the future, whatever the outcome. I have an entity, Kara, guiding me in this project, not to mention the push of my twin soul flame to get this down on paper finally for those of you to read it. If you were meant to see the message, then you will be drawn to it. Kara is what one would call one of my spiritual guides. Although I felt the relationship was one of love and respect, I called this entity friend. Kara had been my constant gentle nudge to trudge on with this, even when it seemed that I had nowhere to go with it in portions of the book. It is a difficult thing to take a channeled message and turn it into a book with a storyline. Kara, who is a male energy, seemingly one of Native American descent, has asked me to write this portion of the book here, so I shall. I am no different than you, the reader, as you will see as you turn the pages. When I turned 43, I went from day to day with an inner anxiousness that troubled me. At the time, I was working for a veterinarian clinic in Texas. In that period of my life or path, I thought that my life was as I had always imagined it should be. I had a job that filled my passion to work with animals. I was married to a man from my early teen years that had been with me for 25 years. He had a good job also. We had a good solid family unit with 3 growing sons, the usual ups and downs as all marriages have. We achieved the life I was brought up in believing was our goal to achieve. The package of goods I was sold as a young adult wasn't my truth. The goal did not satisfy my soul. I guess you could say I was unconsciously searching for something in my life. My conscious was becoming aware of it, which put me in a constant anxious state. It is called soul awakening. It is when one is remembering its soul's purpose or path. There were changes around me that at the time I wasn't aware of. For instance, the clinic was experimenting with the use of holistic medicine in conjunction with traditional treatment on our 4-legged patients. We incorporated the use of crystals, magnets, Reiki, along with sound and light healing. The staff was experimenting with it on us. I had a shoulder injury that my employer suggested I try a magnet on it for relief of its pain. Within an hour, I was able to lift my arm over my head for the first time in months, pain-free. I kept using the magnet for a week, and the problem with my shoulder was no more. As a tight-knit family at work, it was pretty obvious to my friends my anxious state of mind. Out of concern, my friend, the doctor, once again, suggested my seeing someone she knew to help me sort it out. This person she directed me to was a psychic she had known for some time. At first, I thought this was not a solution for me. but soon decided to give it a try. I called and set an appointment for myself for my next day off from work. The day of the appointment, I prepared myself to not give this woman any information on me. I wanted to check this woman out before I would open up to her. I had shown up at her house at the appointed time. She greeted me at the door, and I felt she gave off a warmth and sincerity that put me at ease. I was directed to a room down her hallway. Upon going into the room, I observed the odor of pleasant incense still lingering in the room. The room was a lavender color, very soothing and inviting. There was a table in the middle of the room with a chair on one side and a sofa on the other, which I was directed to sit on. The table had 3 decks of tarot cards on it, a candle and a crystal. I sat down, observing a tape recorder, which I was told was to tape the reading. She began by introducing herself to me and explaining her qualifications in her work. She had been tested in a program for psychic development, had worked with the police departments to find missing children. When I made the appointment on the phone, she required my birth date, information she uses to go over the night before a reading with her guides. She starts with an astrology reading, and then channeled information given her on you from her guides. She has all this prepared for you before your arrival. She was very accurate in her reading on me, on my life, and then she did a tarot reading on me. To reveal what was told me would be of a personal nature, but her predictions of my moving, my life to this point had all come to pass. She was also able to pick up on my husband's energy around me and was very correct in her insight. Although I know now, she knew some things she did not tell me out of respect came to pass as well. When I left there on the way home, I knew my insights, my intuitions on people and situations were okay to be opened with and speak of. There were others like me out there, but I did not know one could make a business out of it or live on it. This experience became a new outlet for me. I gained a new friend and mentor, and I moved on in my life much less anxious. I found myself looking for information in books on many subjects. One subject that interested me was on automatic writing. Upon purchasing a book on it, I read it and applied the information in trying it out for myself, following along the line of my reasoning that nothing is coincidence. I had unknowingly, before finding this subject on automatic writing, been collecting things I needed for the procedure. For instance, incense and candles, crystals gifted me from my friend at the clinic. She had mined herself, and some music I purchased that set a good mood for channeling. All these things I found out in reading the book you used to set the area of working into the correct atmosphere for the writings. Upon the day I set to start this, I followed the suggested procedure the book recommended, from making sure no phone calls would come in to disturb me, having the house alone to myself, having tea before, and soaked in a salt bath. I set the room up, cleared the room with sage, and performed a ritual to keep myself in the light before the attempt. At the desk, when I felt quite calm and comfortable, I picked up the pen and placed it lightly on my paper. I was expectant, but not worried. If nothing happened, I just watched the paper, relaxed my arm and wrist, and asked, "Is there one of my guides with me here?" The pen moved slowly and out of control in large letters, writing, "Yes." Almost holding my breath, I again asked, "Would you speak with me?" It again wrote, "Yes, okay." My stomach was full of butterflies here. Thinking now no more yes and no questions, I asked, "Would you please give me your name?" The pen began again in what felt like a struggle to write this childlike printout on the paper, and I was reading it at each letter, wondering what it was spelling. It spelled Kara. By that time, I dropped the pen, could not think of more to ask or do. Overwhelming tears and excitement inside me took over. Could not believe I had made a contact with something. From that day on, for about a year and a half, I worked with Kara through the writings, which includes this storyline. The sessions with Kara could be back and forth question and answers, debates. At times, family members or friends would speak with Kara through me, as I would write Kara's response. The channeling and automatic writing finally turned into verbal channeling, because the information came faster than the pen could write in my hand. I no longer converse with Kara. It seems like it was a time in my life to open me up to the other side and feel comfortable with it. Now my channeling comes through me when there is a message for someone who is in need of some information. I no longer automatic write. Chapter 8, From Where We Came. Many years passed now on this new vibration-lifted planet. However, to the inhabitants, it seemed like a twinkle of an eye. A region of mountains in Colorado had begun its rebirth cycle. Deep in this mountain, within the forests and valleys, a log cabin lodge sat nestled in a setting of nature's harmonious beauty. On the front porch veranda, in her favorite rocking chair her son made for her, Cheryl sat and rocked as she inhaled the wonderful fragrances of the spring air. She sat in a spot that the sun beated down upon. The wood of the porch floor shined in its natural beauty of ruggedness beneath her feet. She absorbed the sun's heat slowly and laid her head back, listening to the sounds of the woods around her. She gently closed her eyes and began to daydream. Her mind drifted back to memories of the beginning of her life here. The years went by, but it seemed like just yesterday as Cheryl remembered the day she awakened on the unfamiliar ground of the mountain. At the time, she had no recollection of her journey within the spirit world when she awoke and found she was no longer in her house in Texas. On the porch in her rocker, she drifted back to that day. Cheryl remembers raising her head up off the ground where she laid. Upon opening her eyes, trying to adjust her sight to the surroundings, realizing her puddle Max was licking her face, which was what woke her. Max, stop!" She scolded him, then scooped him up into her arms, hugging him, happy to see he was safe. Realizing that thought, she remembered the horrible storm, her house being torn apart by the seams. She stood up holding Max and looking around her. No more house, no more storm. She found herself standing in what appeared to be a wooded area. The ground had matted down years of fallen leaves, soft and cushiony. Looking up to the sky through immense blue spruce, white birch, the sun streamed through in the blue sky. The air was brisk, scented with trees and the forest floor of mulched leaves. Cheryl calculated in her head while holding Max close to her face. "Okay, I'm not dreaming. This place is real. I'm not in my house in Texas, and I don't think I'm dead and in heaven." She put Max down on the ground and he jumped at her legs up and down like a jumping bean. "Okay, boy, let's go see where we are." She felt her internal compass nudge her forward towards the sun. Something within her made her feel like she had done this before. Although she was certain she had never been in this place, she knew up ahead she would find an open clearing. A matter of fact, in her head, the clearing was focusing on her mind. She could see it in her mind's eye. The forest thinned out into an open circular area, which was barren. Then she could feel people there. No, wait, not people, family. She could feel her boys, and yes, Joe also. As she was getting closer and seeing this in her mind, her pace quickened to a run. Tears came, and she began calling through sobs, "Joe, Joe!" She broke into the clearing with a full run and startled her husband Joe as she jumped in his arms, wrapping her arms around his neck. Standing off to the side of him were the three boys, all looking as bewildered as Joe. The boys and Joe, with Cheryl group hugged with tears and emotion that was genuine relief and love. Her family had also found themselves lying on the ground, not knowing how they got there and where exactly they were. After they reunited and tears and hugs went around, they began to discuss where each one was before they found themselves there on the mountain. Joe recounted how he last remembered driving home from work. He was trying to get back to the house as the terrible storm came out of nowhere. He could only remember that he was so worried about her and the boys and how he had to get to them. As he recounted the drive, he remembered driving in a frenzy along with others on the road, trying to manage the treacherous conditions of the road. The ground beneath the vehicles started to move. Joe said he had never been in an earthquake before, and he remembered questioning himself as to whether to pull his truck over or continue driving. He opted to continue, and as he was having second thoughts of his decision, he saw through his pelted windshield of rain and hail, with the wipers going feverishly, a huge tree falling towards him from the side of the road. He remembered swerving the truck to try to get out of the path of the massive falling tree. He blanked out. From then on, nothingness, till he mysteriously awoke there in the woods. Each one of the boys recounted similar stories. Tanner said, "It's weird, Mom. Me and Travis were just in this place with voices talking to us." Yeah, Travis chimed in. It was like a tube all lit up. I could only see me and Tanner in it, but when we talked, our voices sounded like we were in a cave.
Tanner said,
We felt kind of numb, like our feet and arms weren't there. It wasn't dark, there was light in there coming from somewhere. I asked Travis, where are we? I can't move. Where did Chad and his mom go? Where's the car?
Travis continued,
I thought we were dead, Mom. Cheryl hugged the boys together. It's okay, I'm just happy you're here now.
Travis looked around them.
Maybe we are dead. I couldn't hear the voices good in the tunnel. It kind of felt like they were telling us not to be scared. Next thing I knew, the tunnel is gone and we're standing with Dad and Shane. Where did the storm go? How come it's winter around us here, snow and stuff, but I'm not cold? Look, my clothes aren't even wet, and when we were at Chad's, it was raining and then hailing.
He said under his breath.
Kinda like my dreams. We aren't dreaming this, Mom.
Shane walked around to his mom and two brothers from his father's side.
Mom, I was also at the same strange kind of place Eddie Termal and I were on the late bus coming home from football practice. Coach canceled practice because there was this weird kind of lightning in the sky. It was dark already, but the lightning was blue.
Shane continued.
So, while the bus was taking us home, the wind was getting really strong. It was pushing the bus sideways. Felt like the road was moving too. It was making me feel sick to my stomach, and the wind had this high-pitched sound. The bus got up to Mueller's Road, and at that bad curve there, this big tree was down, lying across the road. Mom, the tree was like on fire. It must have got hit by the lightning. The bus driver stopped the bus and told us to get out. He couldn't get around it.
He told us to get down in the ditch on the side of the road fast. We all pushed out of the bus, and I wanted to try to get home on foot, but the ground was shaking so much and the wind too strong to see or stand. The hail started coming down, so I jumped in the ditch and covered my head with my arms. I was scared, Mom.
I could hear everybody yelling and screaming because the hail hurt. I could smell the tree burning and hear it crackling in the fire. Shane explained. I put my head on the ground and closed my eyes, with my arms over my head to protect my head and face. Then all of a sudden the noise drifted off. There was a humming in my ears. My body felt all prickly, like there were pins and needles in it. I raised my head up, and you know what? The bus was gone, and I wasn't in the ditch anymore.
I was in a place like Tanner and Travis just told you.
Only I heard some of what the voices were saying. I think some were people crying. I thought I heard some people greeting others strange. A lot of it was more what I was feeling more than what I heard around me. I swear I heard someone beside me. Couldn't see nothing because it was so bright in this tunnel I was in. But they said, he's going back now. I must have blanked out after that because I was laying on the ground next to Tanner, Travis, and Dad. I can't figure it out. It's totally bizarre.
Joe, getting his wits about him, looked at Shane and his other two sons taking charge, said,
Okay, now it's time for us to see what is here and ahead for us.
Cheryl and her family at the time were totally unaware of the devastation of most of the surrounding areas, but where they woke, much had survived with minimal damage, oddly enough. It wasn't until many days later did they find out what they and others had survived. Joe and Cheryl decided it would be best to find some place for shelter before nightfall came upon them. The family followed the path back through the wooded area. It started to get colder in the shadows of the trees as the sun began setting. Joe seemed to be driven, as if he knew where he was going. In silence and intent, he guided them to another clearing. The sun now gone and the full moon streaming down upon the open area. Below, the moonbeam and stars stood before them in the distance, what appeared to be an abandoned log-built lodge. It was apparent the shelter had not been used for quite some time. It was in great need of care. They all heaved a sigh of relief that they wouldn't have to be subject to the elements that night. Good fortune was with them still. Once inside the lodge, it appeared to be still livable. Even more amazing to the family was the fact there was blankets for bedding, so they would be warm to sleep. Also, upon inspection of the kitchen, there were non-perishable foods to hold them over for a period of time for sustenance. Each of the family members thought to themselves, this setting was almost like it was set for just such an emergency. They were in refuge from outside, and food to eat had been solved for them for the time being. Once they had all wandered around the spacious lodge, eaten, and found some warm clothing left by the previous occupants that fit their needs, they all found bedrooms to lay their heads for sleep. Lying next to Joe in a huge 4-post bed, she curled up to him and let her mind drift. They had made love to one another, so thankful they had found each other. Joe fell asleep and left Cheryl to her thoughts. Cheryl lay in her new bed and home, listening to Joe's breathing in his sleep. Home? She scoffed to herself with a chuckle. I don't even know who owns this lodge, but I'm sure they will not appreciate squatters taking over.
She felt Max hop up on the foot of the bed, snuggling into a comfortable position at her feet. Then he gave a deep sigh, content to sleep. Try as she might, she simply could not find sleep. The bedroom was very large, the bed taking up only one wall of the room. Across the foot of the big bed was a sitting area with a circular braided rug. The fireplace on the far wall with the last embers burning from the fire Joe set before bed. Moonlight entered through the windows onto the sitting area. She caught movement coming out of the hearth of the fireplace. Cheryl, startled, watched as an apparition began to materialize before her. Wanting to wake Joe, she couldn't, feeling paralyzed upon the bed. Even Max did not stir with this thing walking towards the bed from the fireplace. It was not a human being, though ghost-like. The form took shape into a huge timber wolf. She could see the eyes glowing in iridescent, beautiful blue. Locking into the eyes with her own, she heard it say, "Don't be frightened, Cheryl. You chose me as your guide and this form to help you along in your journey here. Feel me, my intent, you know me." It was true. There was something familiar, safe about the wolf, melting her suspicions and apprehension that she was hallucinating. "Can you hear me, wolf?" she asked. "Yes," he replied. "But no one else will hear our conversations. You have been brought here with your family and others from the parallel earth, which is no more as you knew it, in your sleep later. As will the others who came here with you will be reminded of the past life viewing you were given while on the other side. This place will be your family's home, and you will live here the rest of your days, and the boys will move on with their contracted paths. Your brother and your parents did not have a contract for this dimension, nor did Joe's family." But Cheryl tried to interject. The wolf silenced her. "Not now. No questions. In time we will get to them all. I have come to tell you, Watcher. You shall keep journals of this period for others. People will come to you for advice, and you will go to them to guide and inspire. Other Watchers like yourself will be contacted through the veil. You accepted this part of the transition. We admire all of you for this journey you have taken. You're going to find your aging process has been greatly slowed down. Your past life on the old earth will no longer serve you here, other than for looking for positive changes and alternative solutions. Now sleep. We shall speak again many times, my sister." Before drifting off to sleep, Cheryl said a prayer for her and Joe's family, their loved ones who chose not to make the journey to this dimension. In the next days to come, there was so much to figure out in order to become self-sufficient. There was no electricity running in the house. Candles found in the house were used sparingly, and the fireplaces for warmth and light. For cooking, the kitchen had a large wood-burning stove. Joe hoped to later find some other people, and perhaps find a generator of some sort for power. Fortunately, the lodge was only a couple meters from a river, which seemed clean and clear with a strong current. They felt this would be very useful for them now and later. They also found tools left in a shed they could use. There was no indoor plumbing, so the need to draw water daily was an experience for the family. There was only an outhouse to use as a bathroom. This lodge was obviously used at one time for hunters, not for vacationing families. Each day, Joe and Cheryl counted themselves lucky in all that they had to work with to bring the boys up. There was plenty of wood in the forest and wild game for meat. The river provided fish, and come spring they planned to start a garden of vegetables. In the months together in seclusion, they were able to live off the land thanks to Joe and the boys' experience in camping from their past Boy Scout excursions. Funny, in remembering their life before all this, it never made them depressed. It only fueled them in wanting to succeed in keeping alive what they were not proficient in. They became so through each week that paced it. They gained knowledge with each new hurdle while living out in the wilderness. It wasn't until after they found others that had survived in the mountain region that they were able to pool resources on a larger scale. Then life became more than just a personal family concern. It then involved others and meant teamwork. Communication would trickle in about what was going on down below in the valleys and surrounding areas. Others found means to travel and came across other people living in the area. Once the connection to others was made from the lowlands, a bit of familiarity from the life they once knew became apparent. It took a long time, but the small groups of human beings succeeded. The outside world via homemade ham radios cropped up for long-distance communication. Information of the world outside their region reached out further and further over the planet as time passed from days to years. Cheryl was amazed at other stories and news of how they were managing this shift. She kept her journals faithfully and discussed them with her animal guide, the wolf. She could visualize how these places looked by their descriptions. However, she was quite content on her mountain with all the people who were there with she and her family. One thing of interest was the fact everyone had sustained some physical changes, such as the aging process seemed to have almost stopped. The youngsters would reach the age of 18 years old in the normal progression of childhood, but then the aging simply slowed down. So, the adults did not age at all. That was noticeable to the eye. Cheryl channeled with her guides from the other side on this unusual occurrence. As it was explained to her, she passed this on to others. They needed time to rebuild and organize, so they were given this change in their physical anatomy. Aging would eventually start, but not as they were accustomed to before the shift. In fact, as time went on, there was no illness or disease to contend with. In the years to come, there were healers that used natural and spiritual healings to benefit the health of all. It was used for maintaining health and enhancing it. The goals of this new domain were one of welfare for the humans on the planet to keep the planet healthy. A circle complete, Mother Earth was in existence to provide for her stewards, the humans, and the humans kept her healthy and safe in return. Slowly, in a peaceful, dreamy awakening, Cheryl brought her thoughts back to her front porch. She opened her eyes to the sun setting in the west. She looked around satisfactorily. She heaved a long sigh. This was her space here. She had come into her own spiritual growth on this mountain. Cheryl was now so aware of her life path and abilities. Her surroundings of her life filled her with such love and satisfaction. She understood what contentment is in oneself. Her guides had served her well. Cheryl did not have others' answers, but she had the tools to teach them how to discover and decide for themselves. It was her hope that this place they have now to live in will have a better chance than the one they had been removed from. She rose from her rocker on the front porch and gazed out into the trees that extended into the thick forest. She decidedly turned for the door, deep in thought of what she had accomplished with her life. There was no fear of the unknown future. She had already seen the unknown before she arrived here to the mountain. That unknown was home in the spiritual world. This place is merely a lesson towards responsibility as a complete, mature soul.